Sounds good.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. We hold these webinars every other Wednesday as scheduled. You can find this on ndbin.org/events/webinars, our upcoming ones. You are in the September 7th Brain Injury Support System for Caregivers of Survivors with Lisa. But we also have September 21st scheduled all the way through, looks like I'm through like December 14th. So keep coming back on and off. We have these scheduled. So they are recorded and archived. So if you are watching later, the CEU request also is right next to the recording that you can go in and request CEUs for today as well. But yeah, I think that's about it for now. I will turn it over to Lisabeth and let her introduce herself.
Fantastic. Well, hello, everybody that's here and everybody that sees it later. My name is Lisabeth Mackall, which I know is a mouthful, and I will do a quick background. My one housekeeping is that I will do my very best to not let dogs bark. We were just chatting about that. It may happen. I apologize. You know, I think we've all gotten used to that during the pandemic with being home. So great to be here. So I am a speech pathologist by training. I've been a speech therapist for 27 years. I have worked with patients birth, maybe 2 months old, through, I think my oldest patient was 102. So I have a lot of experience dealing with lots of different age groups, different diagnoses. I am a brain injury specialist, a dementia specialist, and a dysphagia specialist. So when you're around as long as I have been, you start to get these titles and labels. And I think all that means is that there's not a lot of continuing eds out there that I haven't either seen or taught, and I'm getting older. So that's kind of how I chalk that up. On a personal note, I have a very large blended household. We live on a farm in southern Minnesota. Not a big farm, little farm. We have about 6 acres. We have dogs and cats and ducks and chickens, and adding to our herd here soon. But we have 9 kids. I have 6 boys that are neurodivergent. I have 3 girls that are all gifted. So we go from one extreme to the other. And before I got married a couple of years ago, I was married previously to a police officer in Minnesota who is still a very close dear friend of mine, but who was gravely injured in a car accident and had a traumatic brain injury. So I come from the school of having a brain injury specialty background, working with patients that had brain injury, and then having brain injury enter my home. And I think it puts me in a very unique place, and which is why I went from being a regional director and running post-acute rehabs all over Minnesota and Wisconsin, all of a sudden thrust into this world of speaking. And I didn't understand how I got here until, you know, you kind of look back and go, okay. So our first educations that I did were a lot of law enforcement trauma, understanding, letting them know where we were coming from, how it worked, what we did. And then Frank, as he recovered, was able to come with us. So it was really, really an interesting dynamic, which is why I was invited here, and which is why I do this. So today's big focus project for me is talking about caregivers. So the other caveat I'll give you is, because I am a speech therapist, I've been paid to talk for 27 years. So I tend to go off a little bit. We're hoping to have some time at the end so that you guys can ask questions, because that's the best part. Because I have such a unique situation, I really want to be able to engage that way. So I will do my best to leave some time. So caregivers come in all different sizes and shapes and lives. Caregiving isn't just about brain injury, although that is one to me that, although sometimes isn't as complex medically, can be, but comes from a different component where you have an individual who maybe is a completely different person. And I talk to that sometimes, but caregiver fatigue occurs when caregivers max out. And in our world, most of the people that are going to see this are probably in the US. There isn't necessarily the biggest scaffolded system put into place to protect individuals that are doing a bulk of the caring. And I think that's where you see a lot of issues come forward. And I will tell you, as we get a little bit more into the components of what I went through, caregiver fatigue and crash is a real deal. And I think we could do better. I think anybody could do better, but you always want to strive to do better. But I really feel like we could do better as an entire country, making sure that the people that are doing the caring are getting what they need. So caregiver fatigue, I always say, how do we protect the protectors? When I started some of this speech, it really did lean back into law enforcement, and how do we protect law enforcement from crashing after a very critical event, like the event that we had and happened to our family. We unfortunately spent a lot of time working and helping others to walk through the process that we were living. What happens when a caregiver is working and being part of a large group, or trying to explain what they need, or working and connecting with healthcare is, there's a couple of these you're going to see, but you're trying to live a life, you're trying to keep your house going, but you're also trying to keep care of somebody else, and life starts to come at you from both sides. You're really, it's that adage, burning the candle at both ends. I had a family member tell me once, she's like, every day I just feel like, and she used this picture almost as the perfect analogy. She's like, I feel like we had this really strong bond and this strong rope, and now every day one more thread is breaking, and I don't know what I'm going to do when that final thread breaks. And what do we do? Well, we're going to talk about some of that today. I'm putting on the brave face. This is everybody, I think we all do it. I think we all do it just from our own stands. But this also is, yep, we're good, we're fine. In Minnesota, if you're watching this, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin, and Iowa, it's, oh, I'm good, I'm fine, I'm great. Big fat lie. We're big fat liars. I'm telling you, we're big fat liars. And I was the queen of the lie. So we're going to talk about that too. I love this photo because it just is so telling. That this is a daughter, a caregiver with this sweet, probably person next to them that are taking to an appointment. And they, when you talk about losing it, you've lost the what right here in this photo. It's just, you hit the wall. You've hit the wall. That's what's happening, because life gets so hard. And we don't want things to happen. We don't want families to fall apart. We don't want relationships to fall apart. And unfortunately, particularly with brain injury, it is a complicated, no one size fits all dynamic. And it's tough. It is not an easy battle, and if you're here, you know that. So again, how do we support? How do we be best? So I will come from a couple different lenses, and sometimes I talk in one lens in the same sentence as another. So I apologize again for that. But as a professional, I feel that we need to connect in a way that we understand that if somebody is a caregiver for somebody with a brain injury, you need to understand that this is taken over their entire being as a person. As a caregiver myself, I lived and breathed and slept and ate this caregiving, because it's part of your everyday waking, sleeping moment. And if we can start to understand our own selves as a caregiver, what is causing us fear and anxiety and stress, then we can help to translate that to the people we work with, whether that be therapists or doctors or nurses or PAs or whoever's in our bubble, so that we aren't feeling alone. I'm not going to say I have all the answers. I'm not going to say that I know every which way to feel better, because I will tell you, I jumped off the cliff. I've been in the pit. That we need to give people the credence that this is scary. This is terrifying. I was a healthcare person who worked in a trauma hospital, and still, knowing what I knew, lived in a pit of, the pit of despair. If you know the movie, it is a really, really terrible, scary place, and it can be incredibly isolating and incredibly lonely. So here's the quick background. I've been around a while, so most people, I won't say most people, a lot of people heard this story. If you would like to, you can really kind of get the in-depth, you can do a little Googling. Google is everybody's friend or enemy these days. But if you look up either my name, Lisabeth Mackall, or Frank Mackall, you can get some backstory and see some of the news stories. But essentially, my ex-husband was a police officer, went to work one day, he worked dog shift, which means nights, which means chaos with our, at that time, 3 children. You'll notice I said I have 9 now. We do have 9, but there's 3. And went to work, had a knock on the door in the middle of the night, and it was a cop at my door, and I immediately knew what that meant. We law enforcement families are not dumb. They know that that's a bad sign. And what I had found out was that Frank, unfortunately, was in a car crash. He was just driving down the road. It was a bad night, and his car went into a rotation and slammed into a tree. Me being who I am, did a bunch of research on, gosh, how many people survive a spinning car crash into a tree at over 70 miles an hour? There's no one. Frank is an anomaly, and I'll tell you why later. But this is essentially what was what at the scene. So this car essentially wrapped itself around a tree at 75 miles an hour. Frank was pinned in this car, and his partner is the one that found him. So you can imagine we have walked the walk of trauma, PTSD, a lot of different areas, and with 3 children at that time also walking along with us. He was eventually, they cut, obviously his, I always like to point this out because, I know the drama around law enforcement right now. I respect it. I have very liberal children and very outspoken children. So I respect opinions. I respect everyone. I come from this. So this is my general quick opinion. But if you can see that door that is bent down, that window frame, his partner did that trying to get Frank out. So if you can imagine just the stress and distress, and what he actually was talking when they got him out of there. They life flighted him out. He coded in the flying ambulance in the helicopter. But we spent a lot of time. He did survive, was not supposed to. We spent a very odd 3 months as he rehabbed and tried to go back to work. Came home, quit my job, walked away, came home, and just lived our life, right? My life didn't end, his life didn't end. So now life is here. We have to now figure out how are we going to navigate that. I, as a caregiver, put my caregiver hat, kind of put on both. I already had a speech therapist hat. I already had a leader hat. I had a mom hat. I had a partner wife hat. I had a couple hats, but now I was adding this other one. This caregiver hat was much, much bigger than I had anticipated. And in retrospect, I can be honest and say, I don't know that I would have done anything differently and I would have had the same outcome. But I can respect and understand when caregivers say, I have to do these things. I have to help these things. I have to work on these things, because every day you wake up and you're still here in this life. So how do we do that? How do we continue to move forward, but live a life? And I will tell you, I didn't do that. And I will tell you one of the things I tell everybody when I do this presentation, when I say I put on, my speech therapist hat, there was a hat that I removed he crashed in January. I think it was October. I'm starting to lose days because it's been a long time now. But I took the wife and partner hat and I put it over here. Put it over there for about 10 months. And if you can imagine living through that trauma and saying, all right, life is going on. I gotta click it forward. I gotta keep going. We're gonna power through this. We're the Mackalls. We're gonna make life as great and good as it can be. What do you think happened after 10 months of that? I'm a human being. I imploded because I had not once mourned, cried, worried about anything, because I became speech therapist. I am super speech therapist. We got this. It was crushing to my soul. And it actually happened twice, because I didn't learn the first time. I apparently was made to repeat that lesson Uh, and it is, it can be devastating. I will tell you that the connection to other caregivers in this country that I have watched others implode themselves, and you can stay locked in it, which is why I like this graphic, and because it says whether you choose to move on and take a chance in the unknown or stay behind locked in the past, think of what could have been, because life goes on, but you have to value what's happening and live in what's happening. And I didn't do that. I very much lived in the do, the get it, the move it, the moving forward. And that's where I, as you see, as we keep going, if I'm going to do anything, I'm going to do it, all out. And so I fell right into the burnout pit, but I did it much faster than some people. Guess I'm just gifted that way. So here's what we're going to do. Really, caregiver support is when it's the beginning. It's the beginning of the world. And if you're really good and you accept the help, which again, I am a chronic Minnesotan, do you need anything? Absolutely not. We're fine. What can I do for you? Oh, nothing. We're good. It's the worst. I talk a lot about grace, and I will tell you why. So we've got caregiver support, caregiver fatigue, and then caregiver burnout. You can see these are sequential, right? You've got people with you, you're being strong, you're strong enough to ask for help, but it doesn't end quickly usually. Things keep going. It gets a little harder, you're a little more tired. I love this one because it says of the strongest of personalities. Unfortunately, that is a hat I also wear. I do a very strong personality, and I was not immune either. And then burnout. And when burnout happens to the person that is the caregiver, can you still caregive? Absolutely not. It's the oxygen mask theory. If you're on an airplane and they tell you, oh, we're losing oxygen, and they drop that mask, they always tell you to do it first onto yourself, because if you don't have oxygen, you can't help the people next to you. Mama instinct is to get it on everybody else, to make sure everybody else is okay. And it feels selfish to take care of yourself. But as we walk through this process and what caregiver burnout looks like and what happens when you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else. So I will say general public does not understand what that toll is. I like that adage that says, you should always be nice to the people around you because you never know what anybody else is going through. You don't. You really don't. And I know social media, we always try to put our best foot forward, and much to my children's dismay, I love being on TikTok. And I always get anytime I'm live, my kids come running out of the house, Mom, get off. But it's a way to connect with people. And I think it's a little more honest, sometimes you can fake anything, but I think if they're looking right at you and it's live, then you are who you are. But it takes a toll, and people have things that are going on. This timeline that I use there was a research study done by the University of Washington, and it walks through this process of caregiver implosion, essentially. Now, this one was specific to dementia. I'm a dementia specialist as well, as I said earlier on. And when I read the study, I was doing research on caregiver fatigue and burnout. The correlates were so good that I think it doesn't matter if it's dementia. It doesn't matter if it's brain injury. It doesn't matter if it's because your elderly parents live with you and they're healthy, but they're 90 and 97 and you're still having to do for them. All of it goes together and takes a toll. If you can, I would pull up that article and read it. It's quite interesting. And honestly, I stopped doing a ton of research after that because this one was so good for this type of presentation. So here's this timeline. And I will tell you, like I say, I'm always the one that says I did this in the super speed mode. This is when you're a functional human being. This is when you want to do the best for them. You're fighting, you're doing everything you can. You can manage them, you can manage the kids, you can manage your job. You guys all look great. Everybody's got haircuts. You're still going out to social events, you're getting to the dentist. Everybody's excited, like, we're going to get this, we're going to fight it, we're going to do it. The Superwoman, Superman, and you're taking care of yourself because you got this. You got this, right? One of my favorite, oh, excuse me, one of my favorite in my face moments, and I use this all the time, and Jill is still around. So we had a chaplain that attached herself to us. And I don't talk to her obviously as much now, but we talked to her, and she knows about this. She knows about being a caregiver. And when we were in the hospital, we had lots of people wanting to do lots of things for us. And we were sitting there chatting, and she said to me, I said to her, sorry, but like every day you bring in water and every day you bring in snacks. She goes, yeah, you need to take care of people. And she took her water and took her own snack. And I'm like, oh, and yep, you need to take care of yourself too. And constantly pawning food off on me because I was not good about eating. And so what she did is she was sitting with me one day, and a family came in and said, oh, Alyssa, can I run down and get you some lunch? And I said, oh, no, we're good. She goes, oh, we were going to bring some food over for you guys too. And I said, oh, I think we're great, but I appreciate you so much. You're so, that's so sweet. Very Minnesotan. And they left, and Jill turned to me and she goes, oh, that's just too bad. It's so sad. And I go, what's so sad? I thought she was reading a book or a story. And she goes, it's just so sad that you took away her blessing. And I said, took away her blessing? I would never take somebody's blessing. What do you mean by this, taking away her blessing? She said, well, you're a giver. You love to do stuff for people. How does that make you feel? I said, oh, it's just so great. I'm optimistic, and I like to help people. A friend of mine was ill, and we used to bring meals over, and I did that for church. And she said, so it's a blessing, right? I said, it is a blessing to be able to help others. And she said, and you just said no. You just said no. You turned her down. You said no. And I sat back and I thought, I just took away somebody's blessing. I physically took that away. And I think it's one of those important moments. This is 10 years later, people. So I'm still talking about this moment that I, in my healing and recovery from this caregiver journey, I went, okay, so there's no need for us to put our capes on. People already think we have capes on, but we don't actually have to put the cape on. The more people we have around us that are helpful and positive and can truly give us what we need, the better. As a part of the country that is very comfortable telling everybody we're fine and that we're good and we don't need the help, I think we're more prone to this kind of caregiver burnout. And that's tough. It's a really, really tough place to be. So in this caregiver timeline that the state of Washington put together, or University of Washington put together, this first 18 months, people generally, again, we're always talking in generalities, they're able to function. They're able to do what they need to do. And that's good. That's a good thing. This is a good place to be. Now, if we could all just stay in this place forever, there wouldn't be burnout. People wouldn't crash and burn. But that's not what happens. That's not what happens. So as we're getting to the 21 month mark, right? So you're at about 1.5 to 2 years. It gets to be a little harder. It gets to be a little harder. So people, the caregivers start to have to maybe take meds to sleep. Maybe it's just a Tylenol PM, or they're just tired, or they just are feeling that kind of chronic headache, and just things are. It's that not quite as peppy as they used to be. It's harder and harder and harder to stay on top of what's happening. There's lots going on, and in the beginning, it's you just do it. But the less energy you have, the harder it is to keep on top of all those things. And during this time, there's usually still people around, whether it be family, a community, support group. There's still things that you're going to. There's still people around, and so you're okay. If you have to rate the barometer of, okay, I'm super great and awesome, and I'm down here needing to be hospitalized because I'm so ill, you're still here near the top. You're still doing okay. But it isn't as great as it was. And fatigue is starting to take over. Things are getting harder. So again, in that general 2 to 3 year mark, you know, things seem to be getting harder. You know, there's no end necessarily to caregiving. The ends are typically, you know, a hard place to be. Either the person passes, or you separate, or you move on, or somebody else takes over, right? So caregiving tends to be a long-term commitment. So 2 to 3 years could be nothing. It could be 20, 30, 40 years. And here we're talking 2 to 3 years. Those emotional resources that you have inherent to yourself are starting to wane. Your physical ability to maintain your own health is starting to wane. As a caregiver, you start to, I'm not going to go see the eye doctor this month. Maybe I'll try and get to do it next month. I just am too tired. Oh, you know what? We didn't go to church this weekend. I'll maybe try to go to church next weekend. And friends, you start to see friends less. You think about a time when things get really, really busy. This is right now is a super busy time of year, again, with everybody, anybody that even if you're retired. I think the transition of the world in September is always interesting. But like I said, we have 9 kids, and the last month until the end of this month are insane. We have 5 going to college, so we're spending hours and hours driving this one to this school, dropping this one to this school. We've got 2 high schoolers that started yesterday. We leave again, and we drive one to Oregon for school, right? There's just so much happening. Well, no dentist appointments are happening. No, nothing else is happening right now. There's too much. It's too much. And that's what we do. We start to push aside the things that aren't immediate needs. Eye doctor, eye doctor can wait. Oh, I'm running out of my meds. You know, I'll get in next month to go see them and get that back. So we know that those are all important things. We have to take care of ourselves, but it's the easiest things to cut in the world that will give us more space and more time. Caregiving starts to be the only focus in the world. Everything seems to wrap around that. And it starts to feel very overwhelming. Like it's just getting harder and harder and harder to wade through the water. And you know, about 2 to 3 years, if things start to reduce in the way of people being around. People, for good or for bad, love a good story, and so they engage and are all in if they can be helpful. But we have short memories in the world of the United States, and so there's always something else, or my life is taking over, so they don't have as much time to be spending with you. And so it gets to be harder and harder to have people come in. It's also harder and harder to say you need help, right? You're having less and less contact with people. And so if you see on the slide, it's less minister, less dentist, less friends, less personal doctor, taking care of yourself. And that help is dwindling away. So you can see now on our meter, if we have this meter here, we've gone from super awesome to kind of tired. And now we've ticked down again, down towards this pit down here that we really want to stay away from. But 2 to 3 years is a long time. Long time. Short time in caregiving, long time in life. 32 months. So now we're really starting to walk on the boardwalk here in a long journey. Stress. In that photo at the beginning, you remember that woman driving in the car and she's just, that's a stress moment. Rooster moment. Told you that would happen. I again apologize for the roosters. Caregivers actually start to take meds just to feel equilibrium, whether that be a tranquilizer, whether that be more and more caffeine or something heavier than caffeine. Pain becomes a real issue. There's a lot of research out there these days which talks about pain as a true symptom of depression. I think that for many, many years, people were poo-pooed in the world of healthcare by healthcare professionals. And I'm a healthcare professional, so I'm allowed to throw us under the bus. That pain is a true part of the neurocomplexity of our being. And pain and so sadness hurts. Depression hurts. It's an actual thing. I think there's a commercial like that right now that says depression hurts. That is a true symptom of of exhaustion and depression. So when you start to think of, okay, no, I'm not taking just a Tylenol PM. I'm also taking, a couple Tylenol in the morning, and then maybe at noon, just because my shoulders are getting really tight. And you're just more tired. And why are you tired? Because you're not sleeping as well. And you can say, well, I'm not sleeping as well because I'm kind of in pain. So maybe I'll take a Tylenol PM. And then at like midnight, I'll just grab another 2 Tylenol. That's a lot of Tylenol, a lot of ibuprofen, a lot of meds. So if you think about that, your body is giving you physical, hands up signs like, hey, we're not doing so good. Hey, I'm not really sleeping well. Hey, I'm hurting. Very easy to ignore and a very slippery slope for people to be running on down here. Caregiver becomes more irritable. It gets it to be harder and harder. Less and less breaks, less contact with other people. You're spending more and more time alone, caregiving, not taking care of yourself, and really starting to decompensate. 38 months. So caregiver feels unwell. Now they haven't seen the doctor, not really engaged in taking care of themselves. So now not feeling rested, always exhausted, hard to even get up out of bed, looks like chronic fatigue, also looks like long COVID. You really are not excited about doing anything for yourself. That's where you start to, nobody's had a haircut in a year. Household is a disaster. There's no socializing, nobody's going out, and you really start to hit that slope of failure. I failed. I'm not doing what I need to do. I'm failing my person. I'm failing myself. I'm failing my family. When you start to layer those different symptoms onto and thoughts and feelings onto somebody that's a caregiver, the impact is incredible, incredibly negative, not incredibly Yahoo, and it really becomes critical. So, pausing right here, let's think about that. 38 months, is just over a couple of years, right? Just over 3 years. I will tell you, at the 3-year mark for us and our family, Frank had done rehab for 3 solid years. We were very blessed with his healthcare, and had done every therapy pretty much known to man, and unfortunately was retired from the police force because his brain injury became, again, fascinating. If it didn't happen to my family, I would have been fascinated by the level of by Frank's brain injury, because although he took a massive hit and should have been crushed in the car, Frank was a power lifter and had his vest on. And so that car, you saw the picture, literally compacted around his body. His brain injury came because he slammed his head on the computer console that sits in a squad car. And the rest of the car just did this around him. It was amazing to see in person that a person could survive that crash. He has a massive dark spot. So I was a big fan of watching his CTs, but he's got a big kind of dead spot in the left frontal lobe, and a tremendous amount of shearing damage. Now, shearing, if you've had a brain injury, obviously we're talking about brain injury today, shearing happens when the brain, instead of doing this or this, does this. Right. And if you think about our brain sitting in here in our skull, when it turns and twists and moves like that, all these little connections and threads rip and rend and tear. And when that happens, you have diffuse or injury all over the place. And that's a big impact on what has happened to Frank. It happens a lot with falls or crashes. And unfortunately with Frank's, his car was rotating. So you went 75 miles an hour down, rotating, and then an immediate stop. We all know that things in motion don't stop. Well, that car did, brain didn't. And so his injury is where he can, shockingly, he drives, he has an apartment, he doesn't work, but he gets up, takes his meds, he has assistance, but looks like a kind of a typical functional person. But there are still tremendous amounts of things that need daily supervision. And if you think about daily monitoring every little thing that happens, that again, you end up in this state of chronic fatigue and chronic exhaustion. Now, flip side of that being a stepping out of the caregiver role and stepping into the professional role, we don't often get to see these patients, not in this state, and not the caregivers in this state. This is way past when people are typically in therapy. Hopefully people have connected and have caregivers, or not caregivers, but support groups, or have other individuals that they're connected with. But again, I'm very comfortable in saying poo-poo to the healthcare system of the world. Yes, we need critical care. I used to work in a trauma hospital. I love trauma care. I love what we could do. But I always, once I realized that the work and the support needs to be here, I'm pointing to my screen that you guys can't, you can see my screen and I'm pointing to it, but this is the hard work. This is the long life work. And where are we as a healthcare world? Where are we with this? I think we all know that answer. We're not in a great place. We're not in a great place. So that's a lot. That's a lot that's been happening. All right, we jumped from about 30, what was that one, was 36, 38 months to 50. So now we're way down the road. Caregiver, chronic fatigue, chronic unwell, cannot ask for help. They become isolated, the individual becomes isolated, and they no longer can find resources. So I'm going to jump back into, put my caregiver hat back on and talk about this. So 50 months is way past when I had my crash. So in all disclosure, I want people to understand that I was in the best position with the most financial and healthcare help that you could get as an individual. And this happened to me. Happened to me at 10 months, and then happened to me again about a year later, where I was literally unable to ask for help. I'm a speech therapist with a brain injury specialty that knows all kinds of people, and I couldn't ask for help. I couldn't ask for help. I couldn't ask for resources. Think about what we give people in the hospital. If you are either a survivor, a caregiver, or a clinician, think about the binders, the paperwork, the resources. Call this hotline, call these people. We've got these brain injury networks across the country are a wealth of information. They have buckets, virtual buckets of internet things they can connect with you. You can't even ask at this rate. At 50 months, you can't ask. I couldn't ask. I couldn't ask. And we crashed. We crashed hard. I became so ill that I ended up in the hospital. Frank and the kids had to have other people help. This is a true thing. Your body eventually will tell you, we're done. We're done. I'm done. You can't, if you're not going to feed me, I'm going to sit in the corner, and you can pretend to be okay and you're not. This is tough. I went back to work at a couple of years post. And I like being a professional. I like working. I'm one of those. And went back to work, was all in. I eventually had to quit because I couldn't manage both. I couldn't manage both. And we went right back into the isolation pit of where we were. This is a true issue. And again, if you think about what happens sometimes, you'll read stories where somebody will fall, you have a partner couple and somebody will fall at home, and the ambulance will come, they'll take them, and they'll come to the hospital and they'll say, oh, Mrs. Jones fell and broke her hip, and her husband is here. Oh, great. What can the husband tell us? And they, well, the husband has dementia, or the husband is chronically ill. And why are they here? Well, they're here because she's the caregiver. So now the caregiver's down, the person that's getting the care, where do they go? What happens now? This is a story that happens over and over and over every day across the country, because we don't have the scaffolded resources available. Now, we have resources, we have connections. There are things and places to go. North Dakota's Brain Injury Network is one of them. Minnesota Brain Injury Alliance is another. But how do we ensure that the caregivers have not put themselves in such a state that they can't even access that? So the fatigue timeline that I always talk about, regardless of where I need. So I still see clients, and when I always check in, usually I'm seeing people way down the line now these days. I'm not getting to see the people at the front end. And honestly, I think there's so many great clinicians around these days that do such a wonderful job, being with patients and doing that front end work. I don't think there's enough of us at the back end. And so I have chosen to step my way to the back end of the bus and be out here for people, because that's where life gets the hardest. Life gets the hardest here at the back. So this is what I ask people when I'm talking. And if you could guess right now, when I'm talking to them, what do you need right now? What is available right now for them? Who can you call for help? What are the barriers? And you know what I get? I don't know. I don't know. So you can ask the questions, or they could ask those questions to themselves. They can't. They virtually can't. Again, the healthcare system that we typically live in, if you can't ask for what you need because of the speed of the world, oftentimes healthcare cannot tell you what you need. So it may be, well, you're not sleeping really well. Let me give you some meds. How's your partner? The person you're caring with. Oh, they're not eating really great. Well, let's see. You know what? Maybe we can get a supplement for them. That doesn't solve the problem. It's a Band-Aid. And I get it. I get that it's a Band-Aid. We're trying to do our best. But when they have been doing this for months or years, where do you go now? That isn't going to solve the overall problem. Again, I said at the very beginning, I don't have all the answers. I'll do a lot of finger pointing, not only at myself, but at everybody else. But what do we do here now? What do we do? So what is the solution? Just ask that to myself, right? The best solution in a perfect world would be that there is long-term engagement of professionals and professional support systems. Now we have support groups, right? We have support groups all over the country, all over the world, that are meant to at least be a lifeline to connect people, and they do great work. They do some great work. Sometimes it's difficult to connect in a way that makes sense to everybody in the group because people come from a lot of different backgrounds. Pause. And so it's often catering to the needs of the group, but individuals like the North Dakota Brain Injury Network will have resources to kind of keep people moving along. Is it enough? Do we do enough? My opinion is no. And it's more than just a phone call. If we can make a phone call, fantastic. If we can connect with those people, fantastic. But I feel like we miss the humanness sometimes. All of us that were in healthcare across the whole world had to shut down. But when we went from being able to touch patients and having to do things remote, granted it opened doors for a lot of us to be able to connect with people all over the world that lots of insurance and other dance folks didn't want us to do for so long. At least there are a couple of tiny positives from the pandemic, and one of them is that healthcare can now be done virtually everywhere, and there's no go back, no take backs on that. It allows us to connect with people in just anywhere, and that's great. But I think we miss that humanness, that component of, let me give you the 10-second hug. Let me in your home. I think sometimes the home is a telling place. You're lucky that this is the view you get of our house. If you can imagine, with not all 9 kids live here, but if you can imagine knowing the chaos that I live in on a daily basis with our family, our house is not pretty, and we live on a farm, so the dirt goes with it. But if you can get to people in that human contact and get into a home, I have virtually stepped into a patient's home to see an individual. This was an individual who'd had her husband had had a stroke. charming, sweetest people. And I walked into the front door and she burst into tears because she was horrified at the state of her house. I will tell you, house not bad, probably better than mine, but not to her standards. Her standards were, she should have had tea out. The dining room table, like everything should have been in its place and clean, because she just physically couldn't do it anymore. Now, did they need me as a speech pathologist? Little bit. He'd had some progression, probably had another stroke and needed some things. But honestly, what I did during my session was spend a tremendous amount of time setting up, because of course now I'm adding to her plate, right? So sure, you started to cry the minute I walked in, and now I'm going to give you more to do. Great, right? The tiny little bit that I could give to give her some I'm still caring for him vibes and feeling were nothing compared to the resources that I sat on the phone with her while I was there and connected her to, Meals on Wheels. They could qualify for paracare and hadn't done that because she didn't want anybody in her house because she felt like it was terrible, but she needed somebody there to help her to have her house better so she would feel better. We get in these loops. We all get in these loops sometimes of, chicken and the egg. You can't have anybody in the home because the house is a mess. And my mom used to do that. She used to clean before the cleaning lady came. Stop it. So it was a really tough call. We sometimes need to literally jump through the hoops for people to make them release some of what they're stuck in. And I could go on and on that. It's tough. Current facts, current situation, I think is again really tough. That's why I love to be able to literally talk to people. I will tell you, I've also had virtual, again, we're in the virtual world where I'll ask them to walk around in their house a little bit. And you get to spy a little bit just because, unless you have the camera on, a tight fit, and you might get to see a couple things and get at least an accurate picture, because no one wants to say, I haven't taken out the garbage in 5 weeks. No one wants to say that. And no one wants to live in that. It's embarrassing. We don't like to be embarrassed. We do everything we can to not be embarrassed. But if we don't know the facts, if a caregiver is completely in a state of burnout and can't give us the components of what they need, which they probably cannot tell you, how do we know how to be the most successful and the most helpful? Well, we don't. So it's the who is the helping, who's getting breaks, who's relieving the caregiver. That goes back to I'm fine. You're not fine. I will tell you a little secret. So it's been 10 years. Frank was injured in 2012. I still have, this is horrifying, I still have at least 5, maybe 10 gift cards for spas, for facials and haircuts and massages. People spent money to give those to me so that I could take a break. And I still have them in my purse. There's a lot of them. Because you feel as if you just can't. And I think that's the biggest message that I'm going to have for you today is it becomes a state of can't. Once people pass the point of mass, I always call it the point of critical mass, there is a point of no return. When that happens, you end up where no one is safe. No one is safe. Safety of the caregiver is bad. Safety of the patient, their person is bad. Sometimes people don't know, but it becomes the most important. People get taken out of their homes. People get yanked and thrown into nursing homes. They get pulled into hospitals. Somebody dies. That also happens. Once we hit here, now we're in a critical need, and we have to have immediate solutions. And unfortunately, immediate solutions are often that. They got to move, they got to leave. We got to close up mom and dad's house. They got to go. But wouldn't it have been great if we could have figured this out beforehand and added what we could so we didn't get here? This is a terrible place to be. This is a terrible, nobody wants, it's the fail. The caregiver doesn't want to fail. The person that they're caring for doesn't want them to fail inherently. But when we get to this point, things are out the window. So what do? What is the solution? Told you I didn't have magic solutions, but I have some practical solutions. So here's my connections that I like to make. I think mentors are really important. I think having specific support contacts to reduce that burnout risk, and I call them the little tattletales, can help with some of the day-to-day. A couple years after Frank's accident, I was connected with a group of women who were also happened to be in law enforcement, but there's lots of other ways to do it. But this is just my personal example. And we were all women that had spouses that had been in critical injury. Many of them had brain injuries. It's just how it worked. Many of them had brain injuries because honestly, if you're shot in the line of duty, most of the time you get to go back to work, depending on where you were hurt. But we were connected and we were literally taken away and brought to Montana and put in a ranch. And we got to have time together. We got to have time separate. And when the women got together, we were all sitting outside. There was no wine allowed. Probably a good thing. We sat outside in front of this fire and started talking. And it was probably one of the most poignant times in my life during that, to understand that, one, I wasn't alone. And the things that happened in my home happened in lots of other places. And these people got it. They got it. They were in the same boat. And then we were connected with people at that event that were professionals and could connect us. So that was a long time ago. I am still in contact with all of those people. And some of us are still together. Frank and I are not still together. Several of them are not together. But we all get it. We can call and say, hey, I just saw your little note on Facebook. What's going on? And they will tell us the truth. We will tell each other the truth. We're not going to say we're fine. We're going to say all holy hell has erupted in my house. Want to see pictures? Look at this. See the hole punched in the wall? See this? See this? Because we know that we're not saying something that they're going to judge us. They're going to be, oh yeah, you want to see what's over here? And they'll show us. So how do we find not just the people that can understand directly? They're important, but they're not always mentors, but the people that we trust to help us, that can get some of those pieces put together for us so we don't crash and burn. Scheduling breaks is the biggest and hardest thing to do. It's the hardest thing to do, to get away, to not feel in control, to ensure that the person is okay and we step away and have a true break. 20 minutes is great. A massage is great. I'm never going to say that they're not, but how do you get true disconnection? Because only when you really disconnect can your body, it's like taking the battery out. You got to take that battery out and put it on the charger for a little while. But if we keep the battery in us and just plug it in, but we're still using it up the space, it charges a lot slower, right? We get that. So how do we make sure that those breaks are truly breaks? The other piece is really, and for me, this is the hardest to find and complicated to schedule. How do we find medical professionals that understand, I know that we're 5 years post. I know that we're 10 years post. I get that I'm 20 years post. We need help. We need help. And then you throw in the mix, health insurance, payments, all of these other things. And you're right back at stage one, right? And people that aren't in the system, I'm in the healthcare system. Lots of other of us are in the healthcare system. When you're not in the healthcare system and you build houses for a living, or you're an accountant, or you you don't understand how the system works. I don't know how accounting works. Look, but I know how healthcare works. That's why I have an accountant. But if you don't have healthcare professionals that can work the system for you, if you don't get it, it's probably feels impossible. I know it would feel impossible. So again, can those folks in healthcare make a difference for the people that are really, really working? They can, but you really have to be committed to making the difference. Being present long-term is critical. If you can't continue to be the person that is going to do that, transitioning them to somebody with a not a gentle handoff, but a hand to, here you go, here's my person, here's, really being present and connected to that will make a difference. Making sure that there is a network in place, that they're engaged with the network, not just, here you go, here's the binder of 17 different people to call in all the counties in the state. I will tell you, a couple years after Frank's crash, we were packing up. I will tell you this is something that I never anticipated in my life. After Frank got hurt, we're home, I was home, we got an opportunity to have somebody come in and redo our floors and windows. It was just one of those things that worked out. So we did that. Little did we know that when you have hardwood floors and you have dogs that run on the hardwood floors and make the noise on the floors, that your spouse with a brain injury can no longer live in that home. We had to move. We literally had to move. And when we were packing up, I found 4 binders of resources for brain injury. And I was like, oh, I probably know all these. And I'm flipping through going, could have used that. Wow, I should call them tomorrow. And I got sucked in to this pit of, oh, I can use these guys. I can use these guys. I forgot. Caregiver, healthcare, brain injury specialist. I forgot there were still additional resources that I could utilize because no one was handing them to me. As professionals, healthcare needs to continue to hand off resources and availability to help. And then meeting others in the field as a healthcare specialist that can help you help these people is going to make you be the person that can make the difference in their lives. These are people that have real lives that are struggling. All right, so this is a part where I give a tiny disclaimer. So this is what I do, but it's, yes, people can connect with me and be part of what I do. But the reason I'm telling you this is because people, to create a system that is sustainable, we just went through all of those really hard, crashing, simple, all these things. Again, we have a scaffolding when we start this journey. And every month that goes by, we lose a couple pieces of wood to dry rot and, termites. If we don't have people underneath rebuilding for us and getting rid of the bugs and adding new scaffolding, it can only sustain us for so long. You have to have a system in place to create support and create movement forward for the long term. As we said, individuals with brain injury can live 50 years, 60 years. What happens when somebody is 50, 60 years old and their caregiver passes? I have a client in a gentleman who reached out to me. I shouldn't even call him a client. He's a friend because I didn't charge him anything. He just, he called to connect with me on Facebook and said, hey, any way I can get into assisted living? And I said, yeah, well, let's chat. So he called me, we chatted. He'd been living in a duplex with his mother for 30 years. Had a brain injury when he was, I don't know, I think in his 20s. And his mom had passed. And now he has this duplex full of stuff. He can't drive. He can't really walk much. He has a buddy who will check in on him every now and then to help him get groceries. That's his life. That's his whole life. And I said, do you have a physician? He's like, yeah, I see my doc every now and then. I said, have you told him that maybe I'd be good? I think you'd be great in a senior housing. You'd have all kinds of people to talk to. Sweet, chatty, charming gentleman. He goes, yeah, sometimes they say I can't afford it, or I don't have Medicaid, or this guy's a veteran. And I said, have you talked to the VA? I mean, we were going through things that happen at the beginning of a journey, not things that happen 30 years, I think it was 35 years post. But no one was connecting with him. I'm sure his mom helped with some of that, because that's what moms do. But she's gone. And now this gentleman is just living there. So we just kind of kept connecting some dots, connecting some other dots. Place for Mom is an organization that I worked with, and they still reach out to me and just ask how he's doing. He did. He did some legwork with some very strategic, call this number. Let's try this number. I knew he could get online because he found me. So I gave him a couple websites, and he did. He finally found somebody to help him sell his place and move into a senior center. It was, fantastic. He messaged me one day. He goes, guess what? I moved. I said, what? What do you mean you moved? He goes, yeah, we got movers and somebody came and took my stuff and I sold things. And he's great. But for that one, there's hundreds of thousands of other people living in exactly his situation that we're not connecting dots for. And I did it because I just did it. I just, as a professional, we go into healthcare because we want to help people. And sometimes we just need to do that. This program that I've developed is essentially that. It's the back end of work for people. I get brain injury. You guys have heard my story. You understand it. I've lived it. I've lived with it. And my goal now is to be the person that can help kind of connect those dots and putting things in place. When people are at that mark of implosion, we have to do better. We have to do better to get people connected. I will tell you again, I'm going to jump back into my own personal for just a couple minutes. At the 5-year mark, 4-year mark, sorry, 1, 2, 3, 3.5-year mark, good gracious. We had a very, Frank and I were really having a tough time. We had actually been gifted a weekend in Florida by a law enforcement chief down in Florida to just come, and he did better in the spring to get him out of Minnesota. I'm in Minnesota, and just get him somewhere. And we were just trying to figure out what to do. We'd had some really tough, he'd been really down, really in a bad place since he was medically retired. And we got home from that trip, and 2 weeks later, I was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And you can't tell me, there isn't one person in this world that can look at me and tell me that that was not caused because of the level of stress that we were living under. Now, hindsight, we found out that it is a genetic thing. We have a genetic marker. My aunt got it. My cousin probably has the genetic marker. We have a whole strain of us redheads that have it. My aunt got it when she was 75. They said, oh, they're not connected. They are connected. My cousin doesn't even have it yet. I got it when I was in my early 40s. Why? Because my life had imploded and I wasn't taking care of myself. Now, obviously, I'm 5 years post. Again, I'm not Superwoman, but I am very lucky to have a lot of people around me. And I've tried to learn this lesson of asking for help, taking help, and being a caregiver, or being a caregiver with support. During that time, obviously, I was working. Maybe I didn't learn my lesson. I worked full time while I was going through 6 months of chemo, but that's a whole nother story. During that time, we had a couple things happen in our planet. We had then had 4 kids. Frank had a younger brother by 23 years that came to live with us. So now we have 4 kids. I have cancer. And unfortunately, people with brain injuries can be exploited. And he was exploited to the tune of $70,000. That is a common occurrence. Doesn't matter how many, again, bricks and mortar and scaffolding, and it doesn't matter how much you try to protect. And again, I knew this, so I was doing my best. We had a lot of that, and it still is happening today, even though we all think, and his team thinks things protected. I'm telling you, they're not nice people in this world. But there came a point in our family in particular where unfortunately, we could no longer live in the arrangement that we had where it was the kids and myself and Frank. And so we did move him to an apartment. Still saw him all the time. Kids saw him all the time. And eventually separated and divorced. And I have remarried. Talk to Frank almost every day. The kids go to see him. Of the four, two are his biologically, and he does see those two. One's in way out in the Southwest at school, but the other one does see him routinely and stays with him routinely. We talk all the time. It is, you know, it isn't a separation of I don't love or care for you as a human being. It is, I will not live to be here for you if we stay right here. And so we made a change. Sometimes that's the ticket. For us, it was the solution. It isn't the solution for everybody, nor is it workable for everybody. The point of that is that that's, you know, we're 10 years out, and this is where we've ended up. I don't want people to end up where we ended up. So again, how do we as caregivers not end up there? How do we as professionals help families to not end up there? Again, I said I don't have every solution, don't have the answer to that, but there are people out there. I'm one, there's many, many others. Brain Injury Network has lots and lots of resources that can be those support people. The tough part is, how do we ensure that we're connecting with those people in that space? This is, so as part of my brain injury support system process, I have 2 Facebook pages. This one is the public group. There's a public group. I also have a private group for anybody that works for me or works with me. Nobody else has access to that except for the clients that I see. But, you know, I always put this up just because if you want to have connections, I post stories and different videos and just things that people can connect with. A lot of the brain injury networks I'll connect on there as well, just so that if somebody finds me by accident or finds me after a presentation, they can go there and be like, oh, I didn't know about this resource. I'm going to go connect with them, because I feel like my job now is to be the person at the back end. And so anything I find, I try to throw out on social media. I know that I no longer have the capacity to do newsletters and those types of things, so I don't. If I'm going to do it, I want to do it right. So this is kind of where I live right now. So we are at the back end of my speech. Again, I always never know if I'm going to talk the whole time or part of the time, but I think we have a smaller group. And that's always great, a time to let people ask questions. I always put this up here as well. 27 miles, the tank's journey home, is actually Frank's story. It is our story from my perspective. We had a CaringBridge site that, again, I started because I couldn't keep up with the texting to tell people how it was doing. So I love CaringBridge so much. I got to present at their corporate headquarters. It was such a blessing. And talk about blessings. That was a great one. And somebody there suggested, she's like, you should write a book. And so I took his CaringBridge page, which by the time we closed it, you can print them. So you can get books of your CaringBridge, which I think ours is 4 books. We had 275,000 people connected all over the world with it. It was really cool. And so that story actually has been picked up by people that work with trauma too, because, and it's rough. People will read it and call me and be like, I know he lived and I know you're okay, but I had to just call you and hear your voice because it was so gut wrenching. This is the stuff that like you type out in the middle of the night when you can't sleep. So it is a real walkthrough from the caregiver perspective of how that felt. The second one is the breast cancer journey, because I did the same thing. So no more trauma. I don't want to write any more books. So we're not going to do that anymore. But this is how you can connect with me. Again, I'm not here to, tote my business, but I am here to be a resource and a connector. I love working with people and helping people. That is what I do. So if you want, Carly, you got the show here. You can let me know.
Yeah, if you have questions, you can either unmute and ask yourself, or if you want to type in the chat, I'm happy to ask it for you.
we have some time, so.
I'll just say you're very, very brave for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing. That's incredible.
I always tell people, well, thanks. I always tell people during my live presentations that if we have time left and nobody asks a question, that I'll just stand there and be quiet. I make somebody ask one question, because usually all it takes is one.
Yeah.
And he and you know, I'll tell you, Frank and I used to tour the country together on this presentation, and it was always great when he would come up, because he'd be like, hey, I'm Frank 2.0. And people would start to ask him questions, and you know, people could ask. We used to present to students, and students, you know, don't have any filter, and they would ask some really pointed questions, but I felt like they were honest. They really truly wanted to know. You know, they're looking at us and looking at the kids and they're like, wow, this is real. And it is real. This is our real life. We're not, you know, I couldn't have made this up, trust me. No questions? Come on, somebody's got to have a question.
Come on, somebody ask a question.
I might just have to sit here and dance.
Are you familiar with the course Powerful Tools for Caregivers?
Did you ask me? I'm sorry, somebody jumped in.
Yeah, have you ever heard of Powerful Tools for Caregivers?
I have. Yeah, there's another, what's this other one? I was just looking at another. I have long COVID now, so my memory is so terrible.
We teach that at the Brain Injury Network. Both Nikki and myself teach that.
I'm so glad.
On and off, you know, when there's a demand for it, we teach it. I love that as well. That's a 6-week series that covers a variety of topics for caregiving, and it's not necessarily just brain injury. It's any disability area. And there's, I love that,
you know, and I think that's, again, the study that I use is, you know, dementia based. And I think caregiving has such, you know, some people are, you know, immersed in oxygen and suction machines, and some people are immersed in medication, and some people are locking all their doors from the inside with padlocks. You know, everybody has a different story, but it still comes down to somebody is caring for another human being who can't do their own stuff. So, you know, the big chunks of it are the same.
Yeah.
So, is there anything that I didn't bring up that you thought I might bring up? That somebody is like, oh, she didn't even talk about this. I'm happy to, like I said, I've done this. I do this in 8 hours in full CEs. So this is one that I've had to like shrink down.
Yeah. I don't think there was, I mean, you covered so much.
That's okay.
Very thorough.
Well, thank you.
Anybody last call for questions?
Elizabeth?
Oh,
yeah. LaDonna Joseph.
Yes. My daughter is currently in at Regents. She has been diagnosed with seizures, fell, and has bleeding on the brain.
I'm so sorry.
Do you have anybody special at Regents that you would recommend? She's has a psych doctor come in, and she's confused, disorientated, and combative.
I'm so sorry. I'm sending you a big giant hug, first of all. Second of all, Regions that's where I was the inpatient leader before I had to leave because of COVID, and I love Regions dearly. Is she on rehab?
No, she's on 6 South Medical ICU.
Yeah. So, you know, the good thing about Regions and why I sorely miss them, but, you know, my calling is at this end, is that, you know, rehab is pretty much focused in on just about everybody in the hospital. You know, they're always watching. You know, go ahead and you can always talk to her team, her medical team, and ask if rehab has been brought in yet. That's what I would do. It's not about a specific person at Regions. It's about connecting the team to the right people. So just say, hey, has anybody from rehab seen her? She's so confused, and she just may need more medical care right now. You know, I don't know anything about that, but about her. But you know, sometimes the medical takes over for a little bit. You know, you got to get the medical to be stable. You got to be stable before you can start to heal. So
Right.
You know, once she's starting to stabilize, you know, ask them, hey, what are my options for getting her connected with rehab? But I'm so sorry. That's a tough
And
one, you know.
yeah,
Kids
that's
are,
awful. I'm sorry, LaDonna. I also threw in the chat for you the Ranchos Los Amigos scale. I think that helps get an understanding of where she might be at. Like, it sounds like she's probably in level 4, which is confused and agitated. But you'll see that there's hope. There's a lot of other levels after 4. So that's probably the scariest level to be at, and for the family and everybody involved. But I like to show it because you can see all the other levels that are coming, and that hopefully she will get better. And again, with rehab and all of that and the healing of the brain, is she'll move on to, you know, level 10 is purposeful, appropriate, you know, living in community, independent, that kind of thing. So I like to show that because it brings common language to a team too. I would assume the team there is probably using that terminology, but just to keep family up to date too on what are the words everyone's using and kind of what everybody's looking for.
All right.
Yeah.
and LaDonna, you know what, if you have, they'll know exactly where this came from. If you ask them, they'll be like, there's Lissa. So there are available at Regions brain injury cards. They're colored cards that really talk about, and it's, you know, brain injury sounds like, it doesn't mean you've been bonked on the head with a bat. Brain injury can be a stroke, somebody who didn't have enough oxygen, somebody who had lots of seizures. So, you know, a brain injury is really, our brain is injured, you know, think of it that way. And we have these cards that really have great language of, here's where your person is, like they're in stage 4. Here's the things you might see. Here's the things that might be happening, so that you know that, oh, this is where she is right now. That's okay. It does. It brings a little bit of calm to that. Oh my gosh, what's happening? If you can ask 6 if they have some. If they don't, ask if they can call down to rehab and get the brain injury cards.
All right. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Hello.
Anybody else have a question?
A great one. Great topic. Yeah.
See, I think I do.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm not a caregiver. I'm a survivor, I guess. And I had a bad car accident like 3.5 years ago.
Mhm.
And I was in the hospital for 6 months. So that was no fun.
No, no. Nobody wants that.
Yeah. And this is my 3rd brain injury.
Oof. Your
And-
poor brain.
Yeah. The first one I was in was in 1968 out at University of, and I was in the hospital out at University of Washington.
Hmm.
And I'm just curious, do they have any resources on caregivers or forecourt caregivers?
So in the sense of getting a caregiver?
No, my wife is my caregiver, and I think she's getting a little burned out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, there are. So definitely. So what state are you in?
North Dakota.
All right. Well, guess what? Carly she's part of the Brain Injury Network and can connect you, I would bet, with that smile on her face, with all kinds of resources. So I'll leave her to answer that question for you.
Okay.
Yeah, hi Robert. I think we've met before. We definitely have some things you and I could for sure visit after if you'd like more specifics. And I would direct you to Lisabeth's info too, if your wife was interested in participating in some of her stuff as well. But yeah, we have an area of our website, a caregiver corner, that I'll throw in the chat here for you right now. But basically that kind of sums up what resources we have available. And like I said, we do teach powerful tools for caregivers. We don't have one open right now, but that would be an option for her the next time we have one. We also have a lot of information on self-care. I think people, again, everyone in this area. I'm in Midwest, you know, everything's fine, and we don't want to spend time or money on ourselves and all of that, but it really, really does make a huge difference in someone's mental health if they take just even 5 minutes a day for themselves. The one thing I love about Powerful Tools for Caregivers is they have to write an action plan, the caregiver does. So every week they need to write a plan of what they're going to do for themselves. And it's not anything to do with the person they're caring for, the care receiver. It's just for the caregiver to, you know, deep breathe, take a bath, go for a walk. You know, anything small like that can really make a big, big difference. And then I like that they have to report back on that and be held accountable for it every week. And then when I'm not teaching class, I kind of miss it. It's like, oh, I missed having to have my action plan, because I always write one too. And you know, we're all caregivers in some sense, you know, whether it's someone with a disability or not. But you know, I'm a mom, so you know, just learning to take time for yourself is very important. But on this, you'll see on this resources, you know, we have 63 free things to do. I know that money oftentimes is a barrier for a lot of caregivers. So there's free stuff you can do. There's a feel good song list. Music lights up all the areas of our brain. So it helps us heal and take us back. We have coloring pages. We have some easy ideas for releasing stress. And a lot of our stuff comes from Powerful Tools for Caregivers. But we've been talking about, or you know, there's some support groups. Robert, you're in Fargo?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think any of my Fargo groups are doing it. My Bismarck groups, I have a couple support groups where they'll go separate ways. So the survivors go to one room, caregivers go to another, and they almost have like two groups going on at the same time. And I really love that idea. And so, but I don't have anyone in Bismarck or Fargo, sorry, right now doing that model. But that would be very cool if we could get.
I had somebody here, but they've all quit since COVID started.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I only have one because all the others quit having a support.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Fargo, you guys are down to basically the John Brown one, right? Over at Sanford.
Yeah, I think that's the only one.
Yeah, I know.
Everybody else, there was like 3 or 4 others, and they all quit.
Yeah, the one was still going, but then they lost one of their staff members, so that's why they're gone. I will reach out though to those Fargo people and see if there's any plans of restarting any of those as well, and if they'd ever want to do.
I'm on your email list. So.
Okay, perfect. Yes. Yeah, but I would just encourage her to get some time away from you, as harsh as that sounds, but that's actually probably what she needs, you know, to be honest, you know, just a little bit of time away, whether it's, you know, 5 to 10 minutes or a couple hours. I think it really helps a lot.
Yeah, we went for a pontoon ride the other day, and with a friend of hers, and she said that was the first time in like 3.5 years that she got to not think about me.
Yeah.
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 So she liked that.
Yeah. Do you guys utilize, is she worried about leaving you? Are you not supposed to be by yourself at all, Robert? Or are you kind of always meet someone there?
I don't know, we had some caregiver support groups come in.
Yeah.
And they, you know, it was Griffin, and then somebody else. I can't remember their name.
Yeah, in North Dakota, you would probably, be willing to bet you'll qualify for like our lifespan respite grant covers respite for certain people. We could talk about that too later. I could throw something in the chat though for everybody just to see. But I sit on their coalition and we got money to spend. So people just need to ask for it though. And I know that's hard to have people come into your house, have strangers come in. I threw it in the chat for you there. But there's an application, but you can see if you would qualify there. Here, I'll throw the actual app in as well.
Well, so I'm a vet, and we can't find a caregiver support group for her because she's not getting paid, I guess. So that's the only way I could get something from the VA. So I don't know what to do.
Here's a good flyer that kind of explains a little bit too, but what I would recommend is to call our that ADRL link, which is on this flyer as well. And basically you tell them, like, we need someone to come into our house. This is the Aging and Disabilities Resource Link. And so they have people there answering the phone, and that's their job, is to help connect you with respite or with whatever it is that she would need to get a break.
Okay. Yeah, send that link to me. You've got my email address.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat. Do you know how to use the chat, Robert?
Oh, no, let's see.
Down along the bottom.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Yeah,
Good.
so I just put the ADRL, and then right above it is the flyer, the caregiver flyer.
Okay, so that goes into my email, or where is it?
If you click on it, it should open up a screen on your computer
Oh, okay.
that'll take you there.
Yeah, if I had
What?
two screens, I could do that. And I don't have two screens down here at the lake. I've got them at home because I used to be a procurement representative at Los Alamos National Lab. And
Mm.
now I'm on forced retirement.
Oh, sure.
Yippee. Yeah, and I missed work for a long time.
Yeah.
I think I'm finally starting to get over it, but
Yeah. That acceptance piece is tricky, isn't it?
yeah. Well, the thing I missed most is I had a $250,000 a month spending limit on my credit card. And to
That's
not
nice.
have, yeah, it was great. It was I think it was a $25,000 one-time expense thing. So I spent a lot of money on that. And then to wake up one day and not have a credit card, it's like, this sucks.
Yeah, finances are also
Yeah.
very tricky after brain injury, aren't they?
Yeah,
All right,
so-
well, anybody else have any other questions for her, or we have 2 minutes left? Anybody else have anything for us? Don't see any. All right, well, thank you so much for your time. That was great. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely. Anytime. It was a pleasure.
Yes, all right. We'll see you guys soon, hopefully.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.